So I'm blowing off this roof. I'm up on the second story. And a woman down over there comes out yelling at me. She says, "Leaves are going in my yard." For God's sakes, woman, there's a tree hanging over your backyard. Life is too short. Every job that we get ourselves into requires that the climber make the decisions based upon what he or her finds as you're working through the tree. It's one thing to look at the tree from the ground and say, I think it needs to have this, and I think it needs to have some weight reduction there, and oh, I can see a defect from the ground. But when you get up in the tree, that's when the real concern about what you find comes true. In this video that's coming up, there were a lot of problems. But if you take too much foliage off, that creates a whole nother problem. So finding the balance in making the tree safe enough is the challenge. Now, if you take 10 different climbers or arborists and put them in the same situation, you're going to find that there will be 10 different decisions, 10 different ideas on what is right and what is the best for the tree. But you have to take into consideration the location, the person who owns the tree, their fears, and the liability. So there's a lot to think about. I think you're going to like this video. So enough of that, let's get on to the tree job. Two very large valley oaks. This is going to be a tree decision video. What I'm going to talk about today are the weaknesses in these trees and the importance these trees' safety is to this highly occupied environment. This is a motel. There's a lot of people that come underneath these trees. It's a very potential liable situation. These trees are old. These trees have a lot of serious problems. I'm going to zoom into some of these holes and these voids and poke around in there, and I want you guys to look closely, because if you're trying to learn how to evaluate trees, I'm going to show you a lot of the things that are indicators of potential weakness. For instance, look at those marks on the back side of that trunk. Always do a walk around at the base of every tree that you're going to work in, or a tree that you're going to inspect. Because if you see basal crown rot or mushrooms or anything that is going to be an indicator of trunk and root weakness, that's where you have to start. I don't see anything here. Is it a raised grade? Well, possibly a little bit. There is a bit of a flare. You look for a flare out where the trunk and the roots join. This doesn't look too bad, but I can see some past wounds down there. What's going on underneath those wounds? Now, this tree has a very unusual defect. This limb that goes up and then veers off to the left there sharply has some serious problems. So let's get up in the bucket and take a closer look. I found that little artifact. I don't know what that was for, but there's that defect. And you're going to see what I'm talking about in a minute here. Do you see how it twists and goes way off to the left? Fortunately, there's not a tremendous amount of weight associated with that, because there is a pretty significant weakness. I'm looking all around here, and you notice that the tree kind of spirals. You can see the wood kind of twists, and it shows a very obvious spiral twisting in the characteristic of the trunk. That's something to pay attention to. Also, notice that it gets thin, and then it gets thick, and then it gets thin again. That's interesting. So look at this. Oh my goodness. There is a void in here that we need to look closer at. How deep is it? Well, fortunately, I've got a probe with me. I brought my 4-foot fiberglass probe, which I take out with me all the time. And let's stick it in here and see how deep it is. I did the best I could putting my camera in there, but it didn't focus very well. Frankly, I was afraid to put my arm in there because I expected bats to come flying out at me. Or maybe a raccoon or angry squirrels. Somebody might live in there. It was quite a deep cavity, and it was visually very obvious. But to better determine, sometimes it's important to put some kind of a probe into these cavities to determine the depth, but also you can poke into the sides of the cavity, and if it's real soft and punky, then it's going to push in. So here's my 4-foot probe, and it goes all the way in. And I didn't bottom out. I don't have a longer small probe like this, so I better get something a little bit more substantial, because the depth of this cavity is something that we've got to know. How strong is this limb? Or should I say, how weak is this limb? So I got my pole saw. It's a 12-foot pole saw, and I shoved it in about 9 feet. It went into the hole, and then the bark, or the trunk, twisted, so I couldn't follow the bend, so it may be hollow even much further than that. That's how far in it went. It kept going further and further. I didn't try the downward motion, which I probably should have, but this told me something is going on inside this trunk. A cylinder is a relatively strong formation, but the decay inside the cylinder is something that's really hard to predict. So how heavy is this? Well, it's not light, but it's not excessively heavy either. The big question is, what can I do to make it any better? And unfortunately, there wasn't a real good answer here. Okay, here's where it goes thin, and then it thickens out, and then it twists, and it gets thin again. Thin being about, I'm going to say about 24 inches, and then it went up to about 32 inches, then back down to about 22 inches. So I was up in the tree doing work with a pole pruner, but I didn't have my camera out. Now, this is a very, very busy place that we're working. A lot of people. It's a motel. This is the tree that I worked on last week, and I took out 20 feet from the top of this and a large branch, because that tree is very, very rotted. So let's look at another hole in the same tree. Okay, I'm probing it with the pole saw. The end of the pole saw, it goes in about a foot. Now, because that hole is so small, I can't go up or down. All I can do is push in. And I'm doing it all from the bucket, and I can't really reach all of these from the bucket. There's another one that should also be probed. This one I was able to get close to, so I just took my handsaw out. And look at that. How much deeper did it go? Well, I wasn't prepared to run my arm up there, but there was another hole down at the end of the branch, and I'm suspecting that this limb is also hollow. Okay. This is my dilemma. There's the other hollow. Look at that one. I wasn't able to reach that with the bucket, so I didn't put a probe down in there. But how much weight is on that limb? Not a tremendous amount, but there's a lot of dead out there, and some of the branches are starting to die back. So my job primarily, look at that. That's a sign of something going on. That's the backside of one of those branches, and it seems to be showing decay all the way through. Now that may be even more of a weakness, but how much weight is associated with that one? Not a tremendous amount. These trees have been lightened up over the years, and unfortunately some of the wounds from the pruning cuts are the wounds that are decaying. Yeah, it's a tough call. What do you do? There's a lot to break. This was not an easy job. So we did some weight reduction all the way around. This is the underside of that big twisting area. I'm looking at it from the opposite direction, and you can see underneath there are some imperfections in the bark, possibly where the bark is cracking and opening up associated with that hollow. There's another hollow. This is what the tree looks like at the end of the day, both of them on day 1. Day 2, I'm out here working again. Okay.